Very good afternoon, everyone. Is my voice audible? It is with great pleasure. I, Dr. T. Swapna, Department of ECE, welcome you all to the 8th day of 2-week faculty development program on transforming education, integrating OBE and NEP 2020. Today's session is on outcome-based assessment and evaluation. Now, I request Dr. Chendu DS, Director, Ranks and Accreditation with AP, to start the session. Over to you, sir.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Hope my screen is visible.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, thank you so much, everyone, for joining here on the second week and third day of the second week of the program on transforming education, integrating OBE and NEP 2020. This talk is more or less like a continuation to our talk where we had on the first week on outcome-based education. Here we'll talk about outcome-based assessment and evaluation. So as we all may be aware, because we are faculty, the outcome-based assessment methods, they are mainly launched to focus on making these assessments very much standardized so that the student's academic performance can be traced. So the important word here is standardized. So in this context, NAP 2020 document also comes with, many times it talks about learning outcomes. It may not be about force outcome or any other, but it talks about learning outcomes because, as I have told you, the learning is a very important part of the outcome-based education. So what the students achieve is matters more than what the students achieve with these results. So here, if we look into the complete picture of outcome-based education, we have 4 different aspects. The first aspect is to plan. This we are going to talk in the next session tomorrow. That's about how can we draft a vision mission for the institute. Once the vision and mission of the institute are there with you, how do you come up with the PEOs, PLOs, and CLOs? And that's the course outcomes, and program educational objectives. The next task, once you have planned these and drafted these outcomes and objectives, it is important for us to engage in the teaching learning process. That's the step number 2, where the course syllabus will be available to us and we come up with our own teaching pedagogies. And in that, we improve the learning process. That will be a continual improvement. Now, finally, the third step is assessment, where in the assessment, you have 3 different aspects of assessments: assessment and evaluation. That's first one, we discuss about the course outcomes, program outcomes, and finally, the university also has some vision and mission. So how do we assess and evaluate all of them? Finally, once this is done, there is a continuous improvement. This is previously we talked about continual. Now this is continuous improvement in all the learning outcomes, activities, and assessment processes. So what is the primary difference between assessment and evaluation? Today's talk is about assessment and evaluation. So the purpose of assessment is to first enhance the quality. This is where the IQAC cell of the university of the college comes in. So they come up with some quality practices so that the purpose of assessment can be, the quality can be enhanced. On the other hand, once you ensure that the assessment is taking place with an function to enhance the quality, next comes the purpose of evaluation, which is to judge whether the quality is being maintained or not. So whether there is an improvement continually or not. So this small picture here demonstrates, it's just like you take the flower pot, you assume it as your student, whatever the water that you sprinkle on the thing, that can be your contents of your course and your teaching learning process, pedagogy and delivery. The person who is holding the pot can be assumed to be a teacher or maybe an organization. Now, once you assess the quality, once you enhance the quality by giving some very good nutrition to the soil in that picture, what happens is after some time you understand that the leaves are very short, or maybe the flower is not blossoming so much. So there is a scope for improvement. So with this analogy, how can we relate this to the academic terms? Let us see in the next few slides. So I would like to at this place recall in that in the first lecture we talked about what the process is, outcome is, and its impact in OBE. The process is the systematic assessment of learning and the results. So when we talk specifically about assessments, we are there in the process, but its effect on the alumni or the parents or the graduates who are supposed to be graduated, and also on the courses and programs that exist, that we call it as an outcome. So this process will have an effect on the evaluation process where the outcome is affected. So this statement is from the NEP document. So the focus is to have less emphasis on the input and greater emphasis on the output potential. So which is concerning the desired learning outcomes. So this diagram you might have recalled that we have an input here, but more specifically than the input, it is important for us to have a great emphasis on the outcome. And this output potential will be based on the learning outcomes. So what is the basic terminology? Because some of your faculty here may be new. I am just trying to revise the basic terminology that we have. A course is maybe a theory or a practical or a theory practical kind of a subject that is offered or either studied in a semester. Whereas the course outcome, what do you expect from the outcome? Here, I will take some inspiration from the NEP 2020 document about the course outcomes. As I told you earlier, it's not specifically, there is no word called course outcome, but they keep telling you repeatedly about something called learning outcomes. I'll also tell you how this learning outcome is different from a course outcome. It's a very subtle difference. So these are course outcomes are generally the statements which give you the learning, essential learning that the student will go through or the learner will go through in that particular course that is offered in the semester. So these describe those significant elements. So the verbs that you use, the action verbs that you use in preparing this course outcome statement must be very much significant so that they actually affect your assessment and examination and they reflect in the evaluation procedures. So once there is a mistake or there is some kind of unattentiveness in this preparation of the course outcome, then it will have an impact even in the attainment processes that we will see tomorrow. So, for example, as I have telling you, this OBE and NEP, what does it talk about? Is attainment has to be done at the end of a course. So, why do we write the course outcome? Is whether to ensure that we have attained the outcome or not. We, in the sense, the learner. So, generally, depending upon the magnitude of the course and its weightage and its credits, we have generally 3 to 4 or maybe 5 to 6 outcomes can be specified for every course. Program, as you all know, BTech, BSc, etc., is the specialization of the discipline of a degree. So just like how a course can be related to a course outcome, several constituents of several courses make together a program, and we also have something called as a program outcome, which is an interconnected arrangements of courses. And what does the OP and NEP says is a learner has to accomplish these predetermined objectives that are leading towards a particular degree. So that's what we call those as program outcomes. Compared to the course outcomes, because course outcomes mostly talk about a specific kind of a course that we deal. Whereas when we talk about program outcomes, they are very narrow and very narrow statements that will have a description on what the learner will be able to do after or at the time of their graduation. Not after, at the time of their graduation. So this is about POs. So generally, there is something called as graduate outcomes, and these POs must be very closely assigned to this graduate attributes. That 12 graduate attributes. So whatever we pick from the to make our program outcomes, they must be aligned with the graduate outcomes. So I was telling you a very subtle difference between course outcomes and learning outcomes. Course outcomes you write as specific as I was telling you, and very important point is because you are trying to assess, evaluate, and finally calculate the attainment. So these course outcomes has to be measurable statements. Measurable statements that will define. What will they define? They will define the 5 aspects: knowledge, skill, competency, attitude, and behavior. A behavior term is missing here, but they will define the 5 terms: knowledge, skill, competency, attitude, and behavior. So, as you may remember, all these 5 skills make together a holistic learning approach. And NEP 2020 also talks about not specifically outcome based, but it integrates these words. So behavioral, when you talk about, it's something related to the lifelong learning, which comes from the NEP document. Competency is when we talk about, it is just not competency in the, for example, if I take an engineering curriculum or in the particular program, but also competencies in the areas surrounding that particular program. So that is competency. Knowledge is a low level of abstraction. So that is, however, there. So skills, attitude, and behavior. So these define the course outcomes that are there in your syllabus. When it comes to learning outcomes, you generally give it up with a verb phrase, and there has to, because it's a verb, there has to be an action within a semester or within a particular 2 months or 3 months time. So course outcomes, what you do is you take them at the end of the semester and you try to attain them. Whereas learning outcomes is not like course outcomes where you have a prescribed semester period. There is a particular time frame which maybe a faculty or an individual who is teaching or learning the course can assign. And with that, there is a verb phrase, and whatever the action that comes out, that is the learning outcome. So the program next comes after COs and POs is the program educational objectives, which are also the statements that describe what this learner, now this learner, having satisfied several course outcomes and attained several COs, he or she will be now graduated, and what have they done or what is expected to be done after their graduation in their career is talked about the PUs. So after their first few years of their graduation, what is the thing that they can achieve is expected out of them. For example, if I take a simple electrical engineer, then maybe he or she may be working in some company where automated switches or etc. So that talks about the program educational objectives where that shows a path to the career for the student. Finally, the last one is program specific outcomes, what the students are able to do at the time of their graduation with respect to a specific discipline. So there are usually 2 to 4 PSOs generally for a given course. And I told you the graduate attributes are 12 in number, and they are also classified based upon these 5 different categories of knowledge, skill, competency, attitude, and behavior. This is the basic terminology that is surrounded around evaluation and assessments. So how do we prepare these assessments and, sorry, not assessment, the course outcomes? So we have to be very careful in choosing the words, because some of the words that we choose, I can pretty much tell you that any course if you take, you have this verb that is to understand in their course outcomes. I am not sure about to know, to appreciate, grasp, enjoy or not, but there is always one particular CO that always tells us comes with a verb called to understand, especially CO1, CO2. These terms that are there on the first column, they are all subjective and they do not make any meaning when you are trying to measure them. So tomorrow we are going to talk about the attainment. So when, when you talk about attainment, you first have to assess and evaluate. So even without knowing how to evaluate and assess, this term called understand, which is a subjective term, there is no reason to put it in the COs. So this I would like to emphasize, because many of these syllabus copies I have seen where they write to understand. So this differs from student to student, and you can never measure what understanding is. And also at this point, I would like to pause for a minute and tell you that whatever the verbs that you choose in your course outcomes, because the examination paper, we are going to talk about assessment and evaluation in today's case. So the exam, for example, CO1 is to understand the behavior of a material, for example, under some thermal stress. Let me take an example. So I have given some thermal stress to a material and I have to understand its behavior. So now, because that is CO1, there has to be a question from the CO1 in the question paper, either in your midterm assessments or maybe in your final assessment test or maybe somewhere in the quiz or somewhere. This CO has to reflect as a question. Only then you can understand whether you have attained that CO. Now you tell me, how do you actually draft a question which is having a verb called understand? So what do you do to understand the behavior of a material? That's the question that is given. I mean, that's the CO that is given. That's the outcome. So after the end of the course, the student will understand. So how do you actually equip this word called understand in a question paper? Instead, if we actually write to compare, an appropriate word would be actually to compare the behavior of material under different stress conditions. So when you put up this component called compare, then it becomes easy for you to actually evaluate and finally come up with an attainment rather than to make understand, to make a component with understand. So it's always suggested that you start with a sentence saying that at the end of the program or at the end of the course, the student will be able to do this. And here at our university, I mean, we follow a very good practice that this COs and POs and their mapping along with the course syllabus will be actually explained to the students in the very first lecture. We generally call that as the 0th hour. So much before we enter into the syllabus, we actually tell the students and sensitize them about the COs, POs, and also open the website, the university's website, or wherever you have drafted these PEOs and PSOs, and show them that how and why are they mapped. And let them very clearly, because it is their right to understand that whatever that is appearing in this CO will definitely reflect in my question paper at the end. So it is not for sake of making it as a quality practice that we do it. It is for our benefit that when we follow this practice, there will be an attainment. I mean, there will be a difference in the attainment, definitely, once the student is sensitized at the very first lecture. So also, I have seen many of the COs, especially written in 2 to 3 lines, where I understand that because I was in close discussion with some of the faculties here. They were trying to say me that there is a syllabus copy with module 1, especially mathematics kind of courses, where the first modules and first 2 modules where they dump it with a lot of basics for the student. So in such case, the course outcome, which was prepared from the first 2 modules itself, I mean, the first outcome prepared from the first 2 modules will have a lengthy statement. It actually doesn't need to be a lengthy statement which covers all the entire components in the module. Then what's the difference between a module and an outcome? You actually have to make it crisp so that it just carries the essence of what the student or the learner will be able to do at the end of the course. It doesn't have to be what is actually present in the course. So that is another example I would like to tell you where generally we make a mistake there. All these things, tomorrow I'll show you very clearly that they don't give us a proper attainment. A place where you have to attain 2 or something, you may land up with an attainment of 1.5 or 1.6 or something. That makes a serious difference. And once again, it will affect the income. So all these must be avoided. And also make sure that some ambiguous words and phrases are also avoided and don't make them too broad or don't make them too specific as well. So this is how we actually prepare the outcome statements. And how do we trace them? I'll start from POs and I'll come to COs. How do we trace them? For example, if I wanted to draft these PEOs, program education objectives, then this program education objectives must be prepared. I mean, the statement comes from several inputs. What are those several inputs? Those several inputs, look at here, if you understand this, it is not just from two places. What are those two? It's just not from the student point of view and the institute point of view. Generally, we prepare our PEOs from the student and the institution goals point of view. Because if you see the pyramid also, first comes the vision statement, after that comes the PEO. So vision and mission statement will be a motivation for PEO. But look at here, there is also environment, national interest, and regional interest. So apart from the student and the institute goals, you're also taking care of the environment and national interests. Why is this? This is because this PEOs that you write, because if I try to run a university, which is a technical university, for example, technical college, for example, and which offers BTech degrees, and you are also running another technical college, which is also giving, it's an autonomous college awarding BTech degrees. Our missions and visions, if you see, they closely relate. Most of the engineering colleges, visions and missions you take, except from a word here or there, they actually most of the visions and mission match. I was working in a very prestigious institute, not to name the institute name, but they were trying to formulate their visions and mission of the of the institute and also of the department. And that faculty who was supposed to be head of the department at that time was calling me and asking, could you please look up with some of the colleges nearby and come up with the 2 to 3 different visions and missions. So it's not like something that you copy from them. And what happens when you do that? Only your program educational objectives get affected. Rather, see, you are from a particular place called, let me say, Telangana. Bring up the national interest and the regional interest surrounding that area. Only then, yesterday's talk was an eye case, you can also plug in the concept of holistic education and bring them into the curriculum. So that what happens, and that's what reflects in your statements of PEOs. So take up the professional body. So all these come under the stakeholder concept. So institute goals, stakeholders like professional bodies, society members, parents, and there is no wonder why we actually take some society members in our IQAC bodies. If you see the constitution of IQAC bodies, the society members are meant for this purpose. But even I have involved in some of the being an IQAC coordinator here, uh, these kind of inputs are very rare from the society membership. So that's why the NEP 2020 document also tells us to sensitize about these issues on formulating the PEOs. The next thing comes is program outcomes. This is a top to bottom approach. Let me say we are having a program outcome 1, PO, that talks about 4 or 5 competencies that can be related in a hierarchical way to 4 or 5 competencies. What are those competencies? We will see in the next few slides. And these competencies in turn are linked with the performance indicators. So they can be, any one component can be linked to several performance indicators. So all these performance indicators, competencies that the students will learn, will be reflected in the statements of the program outcome. So with this, what we can understand is the outcome-based education that is there is actually outcome-based learning that we can call, where if you are talking about the output, generally it can be a qualification that as a degree and a quantity of knowledge that the learner gets. Apart from that, see this diagram, is they both are interlinked to each other, the outcome and the output. So it's not just the qualification that you get from a degree or the quantity of knowledge, but more than quantity, we have to talk about the quality of knowledge. And more than the qualification and the degree that we get, it's more about the competencies and abilities of a learner. That is what is skill-based education. That is what NEP 2020 documents also tells us. And that's when we can integrate the OBE to the concept of NEP, when we introduce more about these skill-based thing. So the last few lectures, maybe about NAP and accreditation, you might have understood the importance of skill-based education, vocational education, etc. But what is my point is, more than understanding of that, you must also make them as a part of your course, and also make sure that it reflects in the statements that you have written for your outcomes and objectives. Only then they will be measurable. Unless they'll be just made in paper. That's it. So writing them in a paper and delivering is not important for us, but in the point of accreditation point of view, it's important for us to make them measurable. So that comes only when we reflect them in the statements. So the need of the hour is not the output as of now, but it's actually the outcome where we talk about competencies. So what are the competencies here? The primarily we give an exam and we evaluate your entire strength of, let me say, you have 60 students in your class, you evaluate their answer scripts and you award them the mark. Based on that, as far as I understand, many of the universities and colleges, they give very importance to something called as the progress report, or we generally call them as result analysis. So what you do is you write from whatever the small unit test or slip test or weekend test that you conduct until the final assessment test. You make a note of all the marks that are obtained by the students. You come up with some pie graph, bar graph charts, and show that this is your pass percentage. Greater than 90% is the pass percentage of my class. Now, honestly, tell me, most of the courses that we take, you know, we get a pass percentage of 80, at least 80 we try to target, and we get 80 percentage of pass percentage, and some of the faculty who take courses may even get 90 and more than 90 as well. Now, on an average, if I take a particular program for the 4 year, let me say BTech in electrical engineering, the student will be learning approximately around 30 to 40 courses, definitely. Each course is 3 to 4 credits. So he may be coming across, on an average, 30 different faculty, or if not, at least 25 different faculty, who have now, if we generally go and audit the result analysis of all these faculty members across these 4 years for one particular course that they have taken, and all the entire class strength, definitely the average would be around 75 to 80. That's what is our pass percentage of the students, as also as how many students have graduated greater than 90%. So NAC also gives us a benchmark for this, greater than 90%, so and so marks, like that. But now keep that aside and tell me, out of these, since you have told that 90% of students have graduated, a step below, you have told that 90% of my students, or at least 80% of my students, have cleared my course. Now tell me, does that number really reflect in the student progression? Because even we, most of the universities, have faced difficulties in getting good numbers for student progression. One of the reason, maybe it is maybe finding it difficult to trace the student, but somehow the students that are going into the higher studies, or students that are placed, the percentages will be around 60% or 70%. So now my question here is, where is the gap of that particular 10% or 15% that is missing? So the number of students that have graduated are 90% or greater than that, whereas the number of students that are progressed into higher studies, maybe placement or become an entrepreneur, or maybe go pursuing higher studies, are generally around 70 to 75% when we see the records. So this 15% we have to definitely concentrate, and that's what NEP 2020 document says, that for those 15% or 20% of students, they were not trained based upon their competencies, but they were trained based on something called as rote learning. So, what is the ability that is acquired by a learner to meet the educational demands of the society is what we have to understand while preparing these statements. So, this gives us a list of the skills that make us the student employable. This is very important. Either on campus or off campus, the student must be employable at the end. Only employable students will contribute to the growth of the nation. So Once again, as I told you, these knowledge, skills, and competencies must be reflected in the program outcomes. So, what are the components of these competencies? Because they, as I told you in the previous slide, no, these are competencies come from the program outcome. So, once we set right the competencies, then we can understand the program outcome statements. So, as I told you, there is knowledge, skill, and attitude. So, we'll go from the top, we'll go from the right hand side. So, that's the bottommost level to the highest level. So, on the knowledge side, we have the awareness, familiarity, and understanding. And this is where generally we are actually ending up our evaluation and assessments, but we are not moving forward towards skills and attitudes. So any question paper you take, it generally concentrates on the understanding level, familiarity of the student on that particular topic will be tested, and awareness will also be tested in terms of some practical application or something else. But when you talk about more about skills, these both may not be appearing in the final question paper or something, but these can be tested as a part of the learning outcomes that I told you. Fixed time frame can be given, and in that fixed time frame we can visualize or we can assess and evaluate whether a student has acquired the personality skill, finding out whether a particular concept that was told and deriving the facts about it and developing professionally. So these can be tested. Along with that, the feelings, behavior, and beliefs can also be tested. These are the components of a competency level. So now look at here, putting them all in one frame. I have two different pictures to show you. Both look quite similar, but I'll tell you what's the difference after that. But as of now, so you'll start with the institute vision and mission and go ahead with the program educational objectives, and then comes the POs, that's the program learning outcomes. As I told you, they are mapped to the competencies, dependent on the competencies. Competencies once again depend on the performance indicators. These performance indicators, looking at them, we prepare the course outcomes or the learning outcomes. Based on that, the course will be designed, and the teaching learning methodology. This is the first slide that I have told you. The teaching learning, that's the plan, do, action, and then improve. That will take place. Finally, look at here is then you come up to the result analysis. It's just not straightforward from the course outcome you come to the result analysis. From the assessment you come to the result analysis. It is from teaching learning methodology and the course design. And then you review and you make an action plan that will change your mission statement again. So this is the same picture that I was talking to you, but in a different, little different sense. This is from the UGC guidelines document that I have taken, UGC guideline document on examination reforms and evaluation processes. So here, this diagram, in this diagram, what is the difference is here we can clearly understand, there is a legend here that clearly tells us to understand what are the assessments and what are the not the assessments. And the other line, the yellow color, green color line rather, sorry, will tell you what are the mapping. So this complete picture will tell you, will guide you rather for mapping, for assessment, and for general flow. So according to the UGC, it tells you that there should be a dynamic and flexible framework. That's what even our NEP document also tells us for all the organization institutions to design their own PEOs. If you remember and recall, I was talking about this in the previous few slides. To evolve. Why? To evolve along with the national and regional interests. So I'll talk about these three different legends now. The first legend is coming up to the assessment part, because first we'll talk about assessment and then go for attainment. So from the PEO, there is assessment after a couple of years after program completion. How does this assessment come? This assessment generally comes from the feedback after the program completion. And there is an assessment of PEOs. So this assessment will directly lead you to an assessment of program educational objectives. That's the first red color line. Once PEOs is done, now look at here. There is course design. You have designed the course, and the course level assessment will be done based upon your course implementation. Look at the flow here. The yellow color line tells us from the course design, the course implementation that will lead us to the course level assessment. Finally, what mapping should you have to do? The mapping starts from course design perspective. Course design, the green color line will follow course design and then program outcomes, and then mapping of these program outcomes will once again lead to the assessment of program educational objectives. So you start here from the left, the dotted yellow color line. You start here from this left, and then you come down until the course implementation, and then finally end up with assessment of PEOs and vision and mission. This is called as a V-shape model. Or in some documents, it's also called as a lobe model, LOBE. LOBE is a learner's perspective of outcome-based education. So that is a lobe model of assessment and evaluation. So how many places do we have assessment here? We have 4 different places of assessment. What are they? The first one is assessment after a couple of years of program completion. The second one is course level assessment. Third level is assessment of your management plan. And final assessment comes here where you have assessment of program educational objectives. So these can be done with the help of once again with the help of assessments, and these assessments heavily depend, at least today, on the Bloom's taxonomy and revised Bloom's taxonomy. This, I think most of the faculty are aware of it. The Bloom's taxonomy was initially having 6 different knowledge levels, starting from knowledge, comprehension, application, analysis, synthesis, and evaluation. So this is an upward pyramid. So your knowledge level keeps on narrowing down as you reach the top of the pyramid. But this was lightly revised so that it has to reflect the knowledge terms more appropriately. Knowledge and remembrance, they both are related to each other. Comprehensive, another meaning for this is understand. Application and apply, they are the same. But analysis and analyze, they are the same. But look at there, the top 2 entries, evaluation and synthesis, have been modified as create and evaluate. So previously, synthesis is where you prepare something from unknown entities. But here this was coming up as evaluation. So more than manufacturing of something, it is important for us to assess and analyze the particular entity. So evaluation is given more weightage. And if you see clearly, the 6th degree of knowledge or the 6th level of knowledge has been moved to the 5th level. And finally, synthesis is, it's not just what you prepare, but it's important for you to create as a whole. So the upper 2 knowledge levels are mostly related on generating new ideas, product development, and they directly reflect the Make in India, Made in India schemes that the India nowadays is looking for. So the first 4, because we usually set many question papers for other universities also, they call and they generally tell us that they give us a template saying which has the first 4 knowledge levels. K1, K2, K3, and K4. Usually K5 and K6 are neglected. Even when they give up the Bloom's taxonomy and their action verbs, they generally ask us to avoid the terms called evaluate, create, or prepare, something like that, the higher levels. So these 4 are generally for assessment based on your course, which specifically talks only about whether the student has attained the particular outcomes or not. But when you want to take a higher level of evaluation and assessment, then you come up with the 5th and 6th component, where I'll show you in the next slide. Where evaluation and creating generally don't come up in the final assessment test or in the general quizzes. They come up with something called as project-oriented learning, assignments, collaborative project works, minor mini projects, field visits, innovative projects, etc. Here in our university, we also have a very good program called engineering clinics, where at a very first year and the second year, the students will be, it's a quality practice that we follow, where the students are given an opportunity to every student. It's a mandatory thing where the students must go through some creation of some electronics or mechanical or anything related to their field. So that will trigger the creating and evaluating component right from their first year and second year. But that doesn't come under any of the assessments that we make for the fixed hour examinations, like 3 hour, 4 hour. Generally, they are open time frame ended, generally long time frame, 3 months, 4 months, etc. And then they are finally evaluated mostly as a group, because they are higher levels of knowledge. So the Bloom's taxonomy talks about these 6 descriptors. And whenever you are trying to find out the levels of attainment, the knowledge level that will talk about the remembrance will just about recalling the memory, like mentioning something, or just recalling something, or maybe defining something. They can come from the remembrance point of view. But whereas the second component is the understanding and comprehensive component, where the student must be able to explain the new ideas and concepts. There was one question here I would like to tell you, because all this may be too elementary, but sometimes there are some important points that can come up. So there was a question by one faculty at some time where the faculty was asking, like, sir, for example, sir, if I am preparing a question on analysis, where the student must be able to compare and analyze something. The question was, this analysis component comes only when the student has understood it, right? So should I actually mark it as level 2, or should I actually mark it as level 4? And then it's quite understandable, because it's a hierarchy. You can come into the next level only when you have crossed the first 3 levels. It's just like a game or something. So analysis, which talks about, breaking the information and exploring the understanding or relationship between 2 or 3 elements, can come only when you have an understanding of that particular concept. The understanding will come only when you can recall the learned material. So always when you are preparing the question paper, make sure that you enter the highest component in your descriptor as a descriptor, which will suit the question paper that you are preparing. This will be easier for evaluation also. And here, because the time has come, I would also like to tell you another suggestion. I'll talk more about this in the next session tomorrow. Also, I would like to suggest that you avoid multiple outcomes for a particular question. This is for the interest of attainment I'm talking. Say, for example, you have prepared question 1, which talks about CO1, CO2, CO3. Avoid giving multiple COs. This can be done only when you have a preparation for yourself before you take up the course. Before you take up the course itself, you must have a clear understanding of what the question that has to be posed. But unfortunately, in our Indian system, as far as I know, if tomorrow the semester begins, or maybe in 3 or 4 days the semester begins, we will be given our courses today. So that's not a decent amount of time for preparing. Not preparing the lecture, but preparing the outcomes and preparing the questions that revolve around these outcomes. Preparing ourselves for the assessment process. That's a very short time. So if there are any deans or principal, I would like to, suggest this as one of the quality practice. It can be a quality practice. At least 3 weeks before or 2 weeks before, minimum, the course, whatever that course will be held by the faculty, must be known to them. So what are the assessment methods that we have? The assessment methods that we have, generally, they are divided into 2 parts. They are called as formative assessment and summative assessment. Formative assessment, they generally take out throughout an instructional period that will help the students and instructors, to monitor their progress, and especially very important, address if there are any learning gaps or identify any learning gaps. So these formative assessments, they are very much less structured than summative assessments. I'll tell you what summative are. Summative assessments is what you do as a summation. That means at the end of the course. These are very much formal. These are very much centralized. And they talk more about the knowledge that you gain from a particular course. And they try to assess you on the proficiency part. So these summative assessments, they are more structured and they are more formal, and generally they include the final assessment test. So what are the goals that we have? The goal for a summative assessment must be that to compare the student's learning against a standard benchmark. So 40% is the pass mark for a final test. So whether the student has achieved a 40% benchmark or not. That is the essence or goal of a summative assessment. Whereas when you come to a formative assessment, the goals are not strict and rigid, but the goal here is actually to help the student to develop professionally on the particular course, identify his or her learning gaps. This formative assessment is what really helps us in the learning outcomes. If you do the formative assessments correctly, that will lead to a better summative assessment. Better summative assessments give you a better learning outcomes. Everything is interlinked. So let's not forget about the formative assessments. And also, as I was talking few slides earlier, the skills and the attitude and the behavioral things, which we cannot generally assess them under the summative assessments, we generally have to do them under formative assessments only. So it also adds up to our attainment process and the learning outcome process. So assessment methods are some strategies that we can come up so that we can determine up to what extent a student has demonstrated a particular learning outcome. So there are two methods here, a formative, summative, I have told you, and in a particular category, you can generally take a direct assessment or an indirect assessment. What is a direct assessment? A direct assessment is where you ask the student to demonstrate their learning. So you take up a lab, and in that lab, you ask the student to maybe program something or verify an experiment. That's a direct method of assessment. Even your end exams are direct methods of assessments. The presentations that you give, poster presentations that you give in the class, the essays, etc. Role plays, field visits, whatever, case studies, reports that you wanted to take, everything comes under the direct assessment method. Whereas the indirect method talks about the student retrospects on their learning, how the student will reflect on their learning. This will come up from the feedback and the survey interviews, feedbacks or surveys or exit interviews, etc. Now, a very important part in the assessment is how do we actually give a weightage to this direct and indirect methods? Most of the colleges here, they only take the direct assessment, direct method of assessment. 100% weightage is given to the direct method. And if you double click the direct method, you only find a summative assessment. You generally don't find formative assessments. So what is missing is formative, summative, direct, indirect. Formative is missing and indirect assessment is also missing. So you are actually assessing and evaluating only for 50% of the criteria. So generally also implement this indirect assessment. So how do we do it? This indirect assessment, one of the methods maybe to take feedback from the students at the end of the course, or maybe twice, once at the midterm and other at the end of the course. And assess yourself about and compare and analyze how does this indirect assessment has changed. I mean, how do you evaluate midterm assessment indirectly and your end term assessment indirectly? I'll tell you an example here. Let me say a course has 5 COs, and you are trying to test the knowledge of the student in all these 5 COs in the direct assessment procedure. But if you stop your process in midway, and if you take an indirect assessment procedure where how far, maybe there can be a questionnaire on a scale of 1 to 5. On a scale of 1 to 5, you come up with a Google form and send a student asking them on a scale of 1 to 5, how much level have you understood CO1? Or what is your level of understanding on CO2? Now you may ask me, the verb understand is being used here. It can be used because it's an indirect assessment, it's not an outcome, right? So the student will, on a scale of 1 to 5, maybe he or she will put 1, 2, etc. Now take the average of all these things and give it some weightage. Let me say out of 5, the entire class average, I have got it as 3. So this is 60% for CO1. Similarly for CO2, CO3, CO4, CO5, etc. So these indirect assessments will also tell us how important it is in the assessment and evaluation process, because you are actually collecting information from the students and you are asking them whether you have understood and asking them to reflect on their learning practices. So it has to be taken twice every year. Maybe if you wanted to account it for the attainment and evaluation, you can account it only once. But if you wanted to, refine your teaching learning processes, you can take it twice an year and assign a minimum of 10 to 20% weightage. Some of the universities I've seen, they are even giving it 30% of weightage to the indirect assessment procedures. So around 10 to 30, 20 is ideal, 10 is minimal, and 30 is a little too huge. So this picture talks about the formative and summative assessment. So daily comes under formative, end of the course comes summative, and interim you have your quarterly tests or the unit tests coming up. So what are the various practices that you can take? Class assignments, case studies, assignment based quiz tests, whereas long tests which are having specific time duration can come up at the end of the course. These 4 are very important, either on soft skill development, reading, analyzing, and interpreting and presentation. Most of our, this is once again, I want this to be as one of the uh, quality practice at your university. If we talk about, if we have the autonomy, to take 20 marks or 30 marks, depending upon what is the policy at your university, as internal assessments, and the other rest of the percent as external assessment, the internal assessment on the faculty, even most of the cases I have seen, they just take the same questions that come at the end exam. They just take the same kind of questions that pop up in the weekly test or the maybe the unit test, etc. But how this is a very right opportunity for us to collect information from the student on their development from the other skills. So why can't you come up with a poster presentation? Why can't you come up with a role play or a self-study, seminar, group discussion? Everything can be done. There are many things that can be done. Project-based learning is also one of a mini project, as I told you in the last slide. And solving exercises. This is the last one, is the only thing that we usually do. But we can also follow the first 3 in the internal assignment procedures. That gives us an altogether a very different kind of a assessment and evaluation. Definitely you do this and you'll see the change in the numbers of your attainment. There is another method for assessment. This is called as a mature method. This I have seen in one of the universities, they follow this. I don't exactly remember, but this 2 years ago, I have seen this and I have inspired from them. A mature method. What is a mature assessment? Is a mature assessment will develop what is already effective and what can be improved. So it is like you are there on the origin and you are seeing both the left and right sides of the road, and you are trying to improve your future progression. So M stands for matching, where your assessment procedure must be aligned with the outcomes to be measured. This we usually do. Even some of the colleges, they don't do it, but whoever has the minimum practicing this OB practices, they do this. They are matching, they, or else at least they try to match the align the outcomes with their assessment practices. Second thing is how appropriate is the method that you are choosing. This one, as I talked in the last slide, whether you are formative or summative, or whether you wanted to take a direct assessment or an indirect assessment procedure. What are the levels of performance that are targeted, and the usefulness of the assessment also must be there. Just because you have to conduct a 60 mark or an 80 mark question, you don't prepare 5 questions, the usefulness and at the end, it must be measurable. And there has to be reliable based upon the known methods and which will yield some consistent results. This is a matured model for assessment and evaluation. So this is the process of assessment and evaluation process, where we usually talk about the stakeholder needs and recommendations. This stakeholder needs and recommendations will lead to the PEOs, the university mission and vision. This row here talks about mission, PEOs, and accreditation criteria. From that, you come to the curriculum, teaching learning processes. You prepare the PEOs and the PLOs. Now, until here we discussed. Now, come here, look at this decision box. What if you have followed the V lobe model that I was talking about, and then you found out that your program educational objectives are not met, or maybe your program outcomes are not met. So when they both are not met, there is one thing that you have to do is you have to revise your curriculum and teaching and learning methods according to the needs of the industry, needs of your nation, and needs of your region specifically. So that if you see here, this will directly lead you to the stakeholder needs. So which actually means that you have not satisfied the needs and recommendations of the stakeholders. An employer is a very important part of a stakeholder. So you have not satisfied the needs of an employee. Once you have not satisfied the needs of an employer, needless to say, your employability rate or the student progression at your university or college will definitely show a less number. So that's a very important aspect of assessment and evaluation. So if your criteria have met, then what you do is this process will just continue, keep on in a loop. So here I would like to talk about what are the support that we get from the ministry side. Is it just like our college only is have to prescribe, have to formulate our own outcomes and so on? How do we actually take the help of the ministry also to satisfy the stakeholders' needs or the national needs or the region needs? How do we actually understand that? And as I told you, NEP 2020 documents also tells this. Most of the audience who are here and listening to this, majority chunk, I understand they are from higher education. But the NEP 2020 emphasizes right from the school education, this has to be revoked and this has to be materialized. So the outcome-based education, the ministry wants to practice it from the school level. So the outcomes, learning outcomes must be prepared from the school level. I'll show you in a few minutes how it can be done, what the support that we can take. But before that, what are the guidelines that maybe the UGC gives us is you have to improve the outcomes in such a way that at least 50% of graduates will have an employment option, not option, are employed actually. And the rest are higher education. So look at here, 50% must be there for employability. So how sure are you? So tomorrow when a batch is being passed out, prepare and ensure that at least 50% of your graduates are employed and the rest are in higher education. Once that is done, yes, you have satisfied the stakeholder needs. And the remaining, at least 2/3 of the students of your complete batch who have passed out, they have to be engaged in some productive activities related to the society. And they must be there in the industry during their studies. Industrial internship can be one of the concept here. And adapting villages, regional education, all these come under the holistic education concept we have learned in the lesson. So at least 2/3 of the students, so which means a major chunk of the student must be actually contributing their education to the needs of the society. So for this, what have to be done is the graduates must acquire with soft skills, entrepreneurship skills, and human values and ethics. I was closely talking with the CDC department, the Career Development Center at our universities. they are most of the universities rather, they what they do is they outsource some faculty who teach the soft skills, entrepreneurship skills, and human values and ethics. So once the student comes to the final year of his or her graduation, then they are introduced to these concepts of soft skills, entrepreneurships, just to enhance their chances of employability. But this isn't it not quite contrasting to what NEP says about outcome based education? NEP talks about outcome based education that right from grade 3, class 3 level, a student must be proficient in reading, writing, and also in all the other learning outcomes that the school prescribes for the grade 3 level. From grade 3 level, you must have these skills that are developed: creativity skills and knowledge skills. So for this purpose, what we can do as a graduate awarding university or as a autonomous body or as an affiliated college is we can think about and try to incorporate some courses that are specifically talking about the soft skills and entrepreneurship in the second year and third year of the student uh, period of stay in the college or university or whatever. So by doing so, what happens is employability increases 0.1, no doubt. But indirectly, what are we trying to do is, because now it has become a course, it will come up with some course outcomes. Because it has some course outcomes, it has to be mapped with the program outcomes. And therefore, you can actually assess and evaluate the student based upon the entrepreneurship skills and soft skills, which are measurable and a part of university mission and vision. If you just take it as an initiative of your career development cell or placement training cell, they cannot be accountable to the attainment procedures unless until you make it as a course. This is what NEP 2020 document talks about outcome-based education, about learning outcomes specifically. For this purpose, the teachers will be given 100% of professional development training courses. NITTR you take, Madan Mohan Malaviya Mission you take. So there are many kinds of professional development centers where we can enhance ourselves so that we can contribute to the needs of the society and improve our teaching pedagogy so that that will reflect in the knowledge domain of the student. So what is the support from the center? Maybe I will take the last point because the first 5 points are very much known to us, and use of ICT was also already discussed in the previous sessions. We all do the outcome based curriculum and periodic revision, but the last point is very important: engagement of higher educational institutions in socially productive activities with the industry. This is where the ministry is trying to support us. Why is this? Because you see here, are at least 2/3 of the student, they wanted to be socially productive activity or contributing to the society, being in industry in their study. So it is just not that they have given the statement, but they have also come up with some kind of support schemes that can be helpful to us. So I will stop this presentation mode and I would like to show you some of the schemes. Starting from, let me start from a school level. Look at here. I hope most of you know, I think because the organizer, she has told me that, ma'am has told me that there are some participations about from the school also. So the Ministry of Education, look at here, this is from the Ministry of Education. In the NCRT, they have come up with a study called as FLS. The report will be launched every year. This report, I'm showing it to you on 2022, where this FLS talks about the fluency in learning and speaking. So how can a student, a school student, can read comprehensively, and what are his or her skills in numeracy, that is in the numerical skills. So here I would like to show you one important aspect. You can go through this report, this is there online. But apart from that, every school can register in this portal and look at here. What is the participation of the students? Especially when this kind of fluency was conducted in a university, not in a university, in a region where Assam and Meghalaya, boys and girls, this is not important to us. What is important here is what is the participation of the state government and private recognized schools. 50% and 37%. So we need not be happy that 50% of state government and 37% have participated. This is a normalized representation. Very sad to see numbers that out of 86,000 schools that are there, the participation was only around 1,300 or 400, if I'm actually right in the numbers. So there are more than 86,000 students across the entire India, but the participation was only from around 1,500 to 1,600. So this is because of the lack of awareness that the government is also helping us to support in these kind of practices, where here is a here is an example. I'll directly go to the state, because state of Tamil Nadu, where we talk about Tamil language. You all know that from our previous few lectures on this FDP, that the NEP 2020 documents gives a very large emphasis on regional education, bilinguistic education, and but look at here, because the reason why I have taken Tamil is because Tamil people, they are very much having their own interest and respect towards their knowledge. But here, look at there, the benchmark of oral reading and fluency with the comprehension and students' performance. The benchmark was around 0 to 8, where it is considered as the students which are below partially. They are meeting the global proficiency level. So being a student, grade 3, school student, 48% of the students who are in grade 3 in the school are unable to meet the global needs of proficiency, minimum needs of proficiency. So when you have such thing, look at the first two. They are adding up to 80%, who partially meet and who even does not meet the partial levels also. 80% of the students in Tamil Nadu, they don't have a proper regional regional fluency in their own language. So when they don't have a fluency in their own language, how do you expect the student to be expressive when they come out of their schools, and how do you think that they can be competitive and show their competencies in the other aspects of skills and attitude and behavior? This report will help us and guide and throw some light on uh, refining the learning outcomes. So what is now the most important priority for a learning outcome is that you try to incorporate more of the regional language into your curriculum, which is somehow missing from this uh, And finally, here I have shown you Tamil. Let me go straight away and show you about English, because we are just on class 3 level. I'll slowly go to higher education, but still we are at class 3. I am showing you the only the basic proficiency things. We don't expect any other higher education thing. On the northern front, when you talk about Hindi, the numbers are way much better when compared to the local languages when we compare. So this portal is called as Nipun Bharat portal. That will the schools can register here, and a set of volunteers from the Nipun Bharat team, they usually visit the schools and they take the assessments and they evaluate the students based upon their progression and based upon their proficiency in speaking, writing, and fluency in communication. So that is called as the ORF scheme. Specifically, this FDP organized by university or college in Telangana. So I wanted to go and show you, especially in Telangana. This is not in particular school wise, but in Telangana wise, the benchmark for the ORF for the entire state, if we consider, The benchmark is around 0 to 14. And if you can see here, the student or the percentage of students which are below partial in English are 27% and 32%. So this is summing up to around 59%, or rather around 60% of the students, they are on less than proficiency level or even less than minimum proficiency levels for this state. So this will give us the entire picture of right from your school. So they come to your schools and they take this data and entirely they sum up and they formulate the entire data so that they can understand what can be done for Nipun in the sense to become proficient Bharat, to make an individual proficient Bharat. So I request, if there are any participants from the schools to kindly register into this Nipun portal, and you need not do any of these outcomes and learning outcomes. The Nipun Bharat team comes up with these benchmarks and learning outcome levels. So it is just enough that you train your students so that uh, they come up with a very good proficiency. The next thing is, if we talk about higher education, this is there in the NAP 2020 document as well. There is something called as Parak model, the Parak scheme. Most of you must be aware of it, but if you're not aware, I'll just try to give a glimpse of what it is. Excellent way of assessing the student outcomes. This portal. What does this portal tell us? Before knowing that, let us all register into the Parak model. Parak model, if you wanted to register, you need not be only a student, you can be a faculty also. You can be an institute also. So once if you register as an institute, whoever is the head of the institute, if they register in this Parak model, they as a whole, suppose if I am registering with VITAP University and I register, what happens is I will have the liberty to give the assessments to all my students in the university. But if you self register as a student or a faculty, then you will be given, suppose you are in third year of your graduation as a student, then that particular student can register as a third year student. Maybe he is from electrical engineering. Then once the student registers here, when he goes to the course tab, a list of courses will appear, which will be floated in the third year, usually across all the universities or colleges in India. So say for example, electrical engineering in the third year, generally they come up with courses called digital communication, digital signal processing. They come up with something called antenna and wave propagation, etc. So the student can see a list of all these courses that are there. So if you want, you in the sense the student wants to take an assessment, the student can click on any one of the course and he or she can see a set of 100 questions that come up. 100 minutes will be given to you. Within the 100 minutes, you should be able to answer 100 uh, questions. Finally, at the end, you will be coming up with a very beautiful analysis of what are your competencies. Whatever the competencies that I have talked about today, knowledge, skill, attitude, behavior, the portal will come with a window popping up saying that, hello, so and so, you have registered for this course and you have given up the assignment. Based upon this assignment, you are, suppose if I take up the course on antenna propagation, which is mostly related to the space research, defense, etc., it may come up with a solution. I mean, we come up with a small comment saying that from the knowledge level, out of those 100 questions, 10 questions are on the knowledge level. So you have performed 8 out of 10. So you have a very good understanding or very good skill in the particular course. But apply, create, and evaluate. When these three Bloom's taxonomy levels, maybe assume that there are about 20 to 30 questions out of that, and the student could not answer more than 5 or 6 properly, then a comment would come up saying that from your skill perspective, not from a knowledge perspective, maybe you have to develop more so that you can target so and so industries, so and so places, etc. So this gives a student a complete vision, and it's like a margadarshaka, a pathway for a student to proceed and tune himself or herself ready for the industry. Even a faculty can participate here and he or she can answer the assessments and can come up with the. It's a very good portal for assessment and evaluation, which also comes up not only with assessment and evaluation, it also comes up with analysis that we as a faculty fail to do, maybe because nobody asks us to do, or maybe because we are falling short of time. So please, everyone, you could log in and use this opportunity of Parak. Parak translates to test. It's a portal for student learning and assessment. And last point I would like to talk about this is you can. There is no age restriction for this. There is no if you. It is enough that you are in your first year of your graduate study. You can enter here, and all the list of courses will be displayed. And once if you fail in any assessment, you can redo the assessment once again and test whether you have improved your skills in that particular course or not. So there is that this revision and reassessment and self retrospect feature also available here. So I think with this, I will stop here. Tomorrow is a very important session on mapping and attainment. So I request all of you to please join the session. For now, I will stop my presentation here. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, sir. Shall we take questions, sir?
Yes, yes, ma'am.
Is it really possible to implement in real-time situations in higher education institutions?
Is it? What is it, ma'am?
That is what the question said. Is it really possible to implement in real-time, real-life situations in higher education institutions? Maybe whatever you were telling, sir.
Yes, 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 ma'am. It is possible. It is possible. See, because if we are left alone blindly, it may not be possible. But as I have told you, there are multiple ways that the ministry is trying to support us. Ministry of Skills, Ministry of Education, they're all trying to support us in these front. So definitely, it is possible. And to all those who are listening here, when we talk about possibilities, it is just not immediate possibility. So 2024 and within 2025, we cannot do anything. So the SDG, Sustainable Development Goals for Education, it is a long vision. And it is envisaged that at least by 2030, we must be able to reach this. So with collective effort, it is definitely possible.
The next question, can non-AICTE institutions register on Parak platform?
No, it has to be an AICT registered institute. You cannot. And it also asks you for their ASHI code and etc. So you have to be AICT registered for that.
The next question, how we increase the students' level of thinking in current education system? How to increase the students' level of thinking in current education system?
There are two ways to it, ma'am, as far as I can see. The first way is you want to increase your students' knowledge in the current education system. So make sure that your assessment processes are having these components inside it. So as I told you, it is very difficult to chip in some kind of contemporary things in the summative assessments, but you make sure that you have formative assessments very regularly. And formative assessments, the student will be very much disturbed because every now and then you come up with an assessment, etc. This is because you give numericals, you give some kind of theory questions that should be avoided. What should be more is ask the student, because now you have a lot of platform for artificial intelligence, GPTs, etc. So ask them to explore what are all the different opportunities that they are having after learning this course, or maybe as a part of their program, come up with a small presentation or a poster, etc. These things will really even help the students to trigger their interest also, and it will also in turn help us as a formative assessment.
Given the government's push to expand online education, how can we ensure that this transition does not compromise the quality of student and teacher interactions? What measures can be taken to maintain or enhance the effectiveness of online education in an increasingly digital world?
Yeah. This question was also asked previously when we were talking about online education. But let me once again tell you that uh, The online education is given. I mean, this online education facility, and we have to utilize it. So it is given that we can, whatever that is not possible with a basic classroom teaching, that we can achieve through online education. But that doesn't mean that this online education will be completely replaces the conventional education. That is why when you look into the mandates, they clearly say that the percentage of online education courses that are thing should be 40%. Beyond 40%, you cannot actually take it. So these 40% of these courses, which are maybe two reasons. Reason one, not possible to put in the syllabus. Reason number two, although it is possible, you may not be having so sophisticated ICT tools to teach those courses, which are more visualizing in nature. So in that particular aspect, online education has its own advantages, but it can never replace the conventional things. See, online things can never become degree awarding places.
We completed the questions, sir.
Yeah.
Sir, really, it was a very informative and in detail and very clarity in presentations. Thank you so much. And I thank all the participants. So before leaving, I request all the participants to please turn on their camera for photo.
Now they turn on.
I request all the participants to turn on the camera for a photo, please. Sir, are you not able to turn on your camera?
Yeah, I was able. This network issue, I didn't understand what did I do. What did I do? Okay. Now you are able to. Yeah. Okay.
There are a lot of messages pouring in the chat window, sir. Excellent session, informative session, nice session, informative session, very good information. Maybe because it is on the assessment and all the teachers got connected to it.
Yeah, thank you. That's why I request them to please join tomorrow's session. Don't miss tomorrow's session.
Yes, sir. We'll send a message in the WhatsApp
Sure.
group.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
So thank you so much. Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone.